What's up, everybody? Another Georgia player arrested. The NCAA shortens the transfer portal window. And what was it like to witness Vanderbilt history? Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what is happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along on today's show. Andrew Allegretta will join us, voice of the Vanderbilt Commodores. We'll get his perspective on what it was like to witness history. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Go place your first $5 bet, and you will get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com today to get started. All right, let's dive into it. We got plenty to discuss as we dive right into it and go around the conference. And first off, we got to start over at Georgia.
Boots out to the right. Takes the handoff. What a catch!
Around the conference.
And over with the Georgia Bulldogs, another player arrested. Now, this one, right, wrong, or indifferent, we're just stating a fact. A Georgia player was arrested. Wide receiver Colbie Young, the latest Georgia player in hot water. A Tuesday morning arrest on charges of battery and assault of an unborn child. The former Miami wide receiver transferred this offseason into Georgia. He was booked by the Athens-Clarke County Police early Tuesday morning. ESPN reported they obtained the incident report from the arrest. And according to that report, a 20-year-old woman who described herself as Young's ex-girlfriend went to his apartment around midnight to discuss their relationship. Those never sound like good conversations to have at midnight, but the conversation became heated. She found Young on the phone with another woman, after which the complainant said Young grabbed her left arm near her biceps and physically pulled her out of his room. She also claimed he was using derogatory terms towards her and demeaning. Young returned to his room, locked his door. The woman says she began to collect her belongings when a friend called her. Upon answering her, Young returned and grabbed her from behind, said the woman, while also claiming he picked her up and began to squeeze her torso. Felt like he was trying to harm her, she said. The officer included in the report he observed a bruise on the woman's chest where it meets her abdomen and redness on her right side. She was transported by police to the Athens hospital for treatment. Young did deny grabbing the woman, told the officer the woman's injuries were not from him. His attorney released a statement saying Colbie Young was arrested last night after he asked his ex-girlfriend to leave his apartment. He did not make physical contact with her in any way. That could be considered a crime. I expect Mr. Young to be fully exonerated once our investigation is complete and the truth revealed. So, University of Georgia said it's a pending legal matter. We will have no further comment at this time. It's another chapter, and I get Georgia fans get frustrated over, stop picking on us. I mean, they keep having players in incidents, and whether this is the Clarke County Police being overly, I don't know what the word is, like, could some of this stuff be settled in simply, hey, both parties go about your way? Was it so bad to the extent that it required arresting? I don't know. I'm not here to judge. I just know what Georgia fans say. A lot of them like to say it's no big deal, whereas other people are saying this is the 7th Georgia football player to be arrested this year. So, again, I'm not here to judge, not here to be, whatever, judge, jury, and executioner. Colbie Young will have his day to prove what really happened. It's just, in another offseason where, Robert Thomas was dismissed from the program earlier this year for family violence charges. You had Trevor Etienne arrested on DUI earlier in the offseason. Defensive back Daniel Harris was arrested. I mean, and then all the speeding arrests. It's just nuts. It's nuts. I don't know what's going on there at Georgia. And, some people have said, well, this happens at other schools, just Georgia's reported nationally. I don't know about that. I never hear about Alabama having multiple players arrested for different things like this. So, again, Georgia fans, not trying to pick on you, but it's another incident under Kirby Smart. Just stop getting arrested. Stop doing things to get yourself arrested. Goodness. All right, other news. Over at Oklahoma, they're getting up for their big Red River Rivalry. Try saying that 8 times really fast. The Sooners taking on the Longhorns. And ahead of their matchup, the Sooners have revealed their team captains will be defensive lineman Ethan Downs, defensive lineman Dominic Williams, defensive back Billy Bowman, linebacker Danny Stutzman, and tight end Bauer Sharp, as well as offensive lineman Nawaiwu. Can't pronounce it, but you know who he is. Anyway, it's a lot of captains to announce for one game, but Billy Bowman, obviously, he and Danny Stutzman have been the leaders of that defense, and they are big-time playmakers for OU. That historic rivalry game, usually played at 11 a.m. Central. It will be 2:30 Central from the Cotton Bowl on Saturday. Over at Arkansas, some interesting ratings as Arkansas's top 10 takedown of Tennessee got the biggest ratings of any game from last week in SEC Week 6. Out in Fayetteville, drew 5.3 million viewers in prime time on ABC with a peak viewership of 6.8 million viewers. It was the top-rated college football game across all networks on Saturday. The second highest-rated game Saturday, also an SEC matchup, as Georgia beat Auburn. That drew 4.9 million viewers on ABC. It was the top-rated afternoon game. And then the top-rated early game was Texas A&M's dominant win over Missouri, drawing 3.3 million viewers. So every week, man, I tell you guys, the SEC on ESPN and ABC was just a cash cow for the Disney and ESPN family networks. And every day I look at CBS and I see poor Adam Zucker up there trying to sell me on who's excited for Michigan and Rutgers, who's excited for Cal and Ohio State. Like, man, Big Ten on CBS. Woof. I do miss the SEC on CBS theme, which is now the Big Ten on CBS theme, and it just doesn't have the same feel. All right, other news going on around the conference. How about over at South Carolina? They are going to lose senior linebacker Bengali Kamara. He has decided to sit out the rest of the season and preserve his eligibility and enter the transfer portal. GamecockCentral.com reporting the fifth-year player played in 4 games for the Gamecocks this year. He will redshirt and play a 6th season of football somewhere else next season. He recorded 9 tackles, 7 of them solo, and a tackle for a loss in his brief time there in Columbia. So more on the transfer portal in a little bit, but that window is getting tighter. We'll talk about that in just a bit. Over at Alabama, Malachi Moore issuing a heartfelt apology Monday, one day after he released a statement on his social media. He spoke with reporters about the meltdown that he had on the field following Bama's loss to Vanderbilt. He said, "I want to apologize again to my family and teammates, the way I acted out of frustration. We put in so much work throughout the summer. I looked at my teammates. For us to go out there and not play up to our standard frustrated me." He said, "It won't happen again. Definitely wish I went about it another way, but can't fix what I did in the past. Only can fix what comes in the future." Now, former member of the Crimson Tide, Clinton Dix, he has come out and talked about this trend of players starting to redshirt mid-season and entering the portal. Of course, Jaheim Otis, the Alabama D lineman, did that earlier this week. And Clinton Dix saying college athletes need to embrace adversity and, quote, develop good habits instead of just hitting the transfer portal when something goes wrong. So could be interesting to see how that goes over. You know, I mean, the UNLV quarterback, Matthew Sluka, he entered the portal. Bear Alexander, the former Georgia Bulldog, now at USC, he did the same thing. Jaheim Otis, now Kamara at South Carolina. Players have the right to do what they want, but it just does feel like you do it mid-season, man. You go, hey, yeah, I know I played in 4 games. I'm going to redshirt. I'm going to transfer elsewhere next offseason. It feels like, I hate to say it, it sounds like old man here, but like it sounds like you're quitting on your team, right? It's like leaving your team in the middle of the season. Not even in the middle of the season. Like, yeah, I'm done, guys. Peace out. See y'all later. All right, over at Tennessee, Greg McElroy broke down Tennessee's loss to Arkansas on his Always College Football show, and he talked about the offense. He said the offense is at a crossroads now, while Nico Iamaleava is still trying to develop as a young quarterback. He said, I wanted everyone wants Nico to be a superstar from day one, but that's just not really reality right now. He said it was probably his worst performance, but that's okay. He's still just a freshman. The good news is they got a lot of talent still on that offense, but he said Tennessee their offense is just at a crossroads right now. Going to be interesting to see how that changes here down the stretch. Chris Doering over on the SEC Network made a pretty good argument the other day about quarterbacks in the SEC. He said basically the SEC quarterbacks and their ability to lead their programs to national championships. There's plenty of good quarterbacks, but he was on SEC this morning on Tuesday and said that basically looking at the quarterbacks in the SEC right now, he said, I wonder if at the end of the year it costs the SEC a national championship not having a caliber quarterback that can lead their team, to an undefeated or one-loss season. Just an interesting, we'll revisit this at the end of the year. Look, if Jalen Milroe in Alabama recuperate and run the table, maybe we're not talking about this. If Quinn Ewers in Texas go undefeated the rest of the way, we're probably not talking about this, but it's just an interesting angle. Hasn't really been talked about that. Maybe the caliber of quarterback play in the conference, while good, maybe isn't up to that national championship standard. Wouldn't that be something to have second straight year SEC not play for or win a national championship? That would be pretty disappointing. Over at Texas A&M, Joel Klatt talking about the Aggies as one of the teams that he thinks is a dark horse to make the playoff and win the national championship. On his Fox Sports podcast, he talked about the Aggies and said it's not all that crazy to think of them as a top caliber team that can run the table, or not run the table, but, maybe have one more loss the rest of the way and go 10-2. They are idle this week. They'll play Mississippi State and Starkville the week after that, but Connor Wegman's back and A&M looks pretty strong with the run game and the defense. And lastly, over at Kentucky, Rick Pitino, head coach over at St. John's, but he misses Lexington. On Tuesday, Pitino announced on social media he's heading to Lexington Saturday for their football game against Vanderbilt. Pitino's been a big supporter of Mark Pope, his former player, returning to Kentucky as the head coach. And Kentucky will have their Big Blue Madness on Friday. So you got to assume that Pitino will be a Big Blue Madness on Friday. That's a little weird, having the former Kentucky head coach back supporting his former player now as the head coach while he's still a head coach somewhere else. Kentucky against Vanderbilt, 7:45 Eastern, Saturday night on the SEC Network. And there you have it. You are all caught up on the latest news going on around the conference. Coming up next, we are going to switch gears and talk with our buddy Andrew Allegretta, voice of the Vanderbilt Commodores, get his perspective on the biggest win in the history of Vanderbilt football. That's coming your way here in just a sec. First, I want to remind you guys, today's episode is presented by our friends over at FanDuel. And if you're an NFL fan, a college football fan, you could start this season with a big return over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You will get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. If you've never signed up on FanDuel before, go check them out. Get signed up over at FanDuel.com. Then you can download the app and check out all the great lines. They got all the big SEC games happening this weekend. If you like Texas, minus the 14 over Oklahoma. If you like Alabama, minus the 21 against South Carolina. All those games are up there for you up at FanDuel. Again, it's America's #1 sports book. Check them out, FanDuel.com. Get signed up. Take advantage of the $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet over at FanDuel.
Clock is at 32. Diego Pavia under center from the 27. He takes the snap.
That's gonna do it.
Vanderbilt
biggest win in Vanderbilt history.
Is this real life? You bet. Vanderbilt beats Alabama for the first time in a generation. The greatest moment in Vanderbilt football history. Tonight at First Bank Stadium. The final 3 seconds off the clock. That is going to do it. Storm the field, Doors. Storm the field. For the first time, Vanderbilt knocks off the #1 team in America. My goodness, what a night. Vandy fans, have your moment.
Right along here, locked on SEC, and man, I can't get enough of the conversation from the monster upsets over the weekend in the SEC. And joining us now, a guy who was there firsthand, saw it, called it. Andrew Allegretta, voice of the Vanderbilt Commodores as Vandy. The greatest moment in Vanderbilt football history, I believe you said on the call. As you said, is this real life? You bet. Welcome in, man. What a moment in not just Vanderbilt football history, in your career. Just take me through it. What was this like on Saturday?
Well, the first thing was I did double check, right? Like, my color analyst played for Vanderbilt back in 1982, and this is my 4th season with Vanderbilt. So I had a sense that, like, in all reality, this was the greatest moment in Vanderbilt football history. But I did double check with them, and I felt like someone like figuring out no-hitter statistics before we've actually gotten to the 9th inning. So I didn't want to jinx it, but I did double check. I'm like, if this gets across this finish line, is this actually the greatest victory in Vanderbilt football history? And he said unequivocally 100%. And the rest of it from there is just, it's so serendipitous. Everything that happened throughout the course of that night, right down to the fact that someone who's so significant to the Vanderbilt community, Nate Bargatze, is hosting SNL, and then has that moment at the end of the show when he gives you a shout out. It felt, again, surreal, serendipitous, and certainly a moment that you let wash over you as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, it's wild because we just, look, Vanderbilt they've been who they are. They're the school that certainly helps the collegiate side of things in the conference with the high academic standards and all that. But, and obviously baseball, winning national championships, being a contender there. Basketball has had their years of being very, very good. So many other sports. It's just the football program has had its struggles. And Bobby Johnson had some nice years. James Franklin, of course, so many people think of those years as like the peak, like where he had them winning a bunch of games. And then Derek Mason had a couple nice seasons. But it felt like, Andrew, and you've been there for this Clark Lee run, like 2 years ago, the upset of Florida and Kentucky, it was like, wow, those are monumental wins. And then last year, it felt like it took a step back. And it was like, all right, no wins in the conference. What did it feel like this offseason? I mean, we always hear like, oh, things are changing and all this, but Clark Lee's attitude at SEC Media Days seemed like a much more confident guy. You just knew this was going to be different.
At least from my perspective, there was so much curiosity going into the season. I think the changes felt seismic, though. It's not like we made a couple of roster changes and you added a few pieces through the transfer portal. It was the night of the Tennessee loss, sitting in that locker room, talking with Clark, doing the post-game radio interview, and him saying basically and bluntly, things cannot and will not stay the same. And it took a couple of days, but then some press releases started to trickle out. They're going to make a change at strength and conditioning coach, and then a change at defensive coordinator, and a change at offensive coordinator. And so much began to shift under Vanderbilt's feet. And we'll see where this continues to go, right? Because you just mentioned the fact that Vanderbilt had those moments under Clark in 22 with Kentucky and Florida. So this is a massive moment, and I'm not underselling it in the slightest, but we have our own perspective here with Clark that can tell us that one moment is not the end moment. But certainly one of the other significant points is the moment that they brought Diego Pavia into the fold. But so much changed, and it's all gelled together pretty significantly. And certainly it's culminated in that moment versus Alabama. And even the other two losses, notable, the Georgia State one, but also the close loss versus Missouri. So, I've done enough interviews and you guys watched the game. This was not a fluke versus Alabama. Vanderbilt went and took it from Alabama. So all 5 games that Vanderbilt has played, they've performed at least to a capacity where they can keep the score very, very close or pull off a massive upset.
It's crazy, Andrew. And I hate to put the cart before the horse, but, talking about, great offseason transfers. I think Joe Burrow going to LSU will go down as one of the top 10 biggest transfers ever. But this Diego Pavia transfer, we saw what he did to Auburn last year, but the attachment with bringing over Jerry Kill, with Tim Beck, with Eli Stowers, like it feels like that foursome together has instantly turned Vanderbilt from, let's call it what it is, the doormat of the SEC a year ago, to an instant, they are a contender. They are absolutely a contender in this thing.
I think Vanderbilt at the moment in scoring offense is like 4th or 5th in the league. at like 37, 38 points per game. When's the last time you said that about a Vanderbilt offense? And I'll be honest and very, very frank with you too. I think when I first started to hear that potentially Diego Pavia might be the quarterback and he might transfer in, I think like a lot of Vanderbilt fans, you started to watch some New Mexico State tape or game film. And again, to be honest, I said, oh, I hope there's something that I'm missing here, because the athleticism is, it's good, but he's not going to be someone, and never was someone, that was invited to some sort of Elite 11 quarterback camp. And if he wanted to go, they would have said thanks, but no thanks. And there was something that I was missing. And it's everything that Diego Pavia is, the intangibles, and the way that he can move a roster and galvanize a roster. The fact that he doesn't have the single strongest arm in the Southeastern Conference doesn't matter. The fact that he doesn't have the fastest 40 time doesn't matter. It's the culmination of Tim Beck's offense and the way that Diego Pavia executes it and the way that he leads this team means everything.
It's interesting too, Andrew. I talk about, Cedric Alexander. I remember seeing a glimpse of him early last year, and I was like, I like this kid. He's talented back. And I look up and down that roster, and there's some talent. It's not devoid of talent, but it just felt like they needed to be fine-tuned. And that's what's so amazing about this is you have talented players. It just took the right coaches and the right scheme. And kudos to Clark Lee for doing what needed to be done. I think Brian Kelly gave him credit the other day at his press conference saying, look, sometimes as coaches, we want to do it all and we're set in our ways. Sometimes you got to take a step back and go, you know what? We're going to hand over the offense to you guys. You guys take full control. You know what you're doing. I'm going to focus on the defense. And man, so far, this just looks like a marriage made in heaven in how they've done this thing.
Yeah, he probably also did a couple of other things that shifted from his original vision from the program. One of them was to become more transactional. Now, we didn't completely flip the roster with the transfer portal, but they did put the mechanisms in place to be an active player in the transfer portal. And that's been pretty significant as well. Certainly with Diego, certainly with Eli Stowers and others. And the other one was, I need to get more involved in the football X's and O's. I think he wanted to be that CEO head coach when he first got here at Vanderbilt's. And he had Jesse Minter as just a defensive coordinator. And Jesse's gone on to be the defensive coordinator for Jim Harbaugh in the NFL. But he's such a defensive-minded coach, and he is so gifted as a defensive coordinator. It's almost a shame that he wasn't scheming up the defense the first couple of seasons. And we've seen what it looks like once again with him back as the defensive coordinator here with Vanderbilt. And I feel like it's made him a better coach overall. Like some of the periphery stuff is, he can kind of let it wash through because his focus is on the defense. And one of the things that Jerry Kill, I think, brought to this program too is like, there's so much to think about in college football, right? You can think about transfer portal and donors and the shifting landscape of it all. And Jerry Kill's really good about boiling down college football to like the 3 or 4 things that help you win on a Saturday. And I think he's helped bring that to Clark. And all of that, again, has just collided to be really significant through 5 games.
I got just a couple more for you here, Andrew. Crazy to think. You're literally 2 plays away from being 5-0. The late defensive touchdown given up at Georgia State. And then in overtime with Mizzou, you have the pass to Junior Sherrill. Like, let's just say he completes that. That's a walk-off win. And this team's undefeated right now. It's crazy to think that way.
So I'm going to go back and quote someone that's been significant in my football worlds, which was the couple of seasons that I spent with Willie Fritz at Tulane, of course, the head coach at Houston now. And I remember sitting back, I guess at the end of the 2019 season, and Tulane kind of struggled toward the finish line. And we talked in his office, Tulane had that incredible game versus Houston. For those that remember that, they faked a knee and eventually got a Hail Mary to win the game against Houston on a Thursday night. And he said at the end of the season, this stuff sort of evens out, right? So you kind of pull a game out of your hat that you didn't expect to win, and then perhaps you dropped a couple. So yes, I hear your point, but I also concede the fact that, Alabama was a pretty special night. And Vanderbilt did not let Alabama get the football back at the end of the ball game. But let's say by happenstance, for some reason, Alabama does get the football back at the end of the ball game. That game could have flipped as well. So you sit there and you say, oh, you missed one versus Georgia State. Well, what happens if that pass by Virginia Tech in the first overtime gets completed instead of going incomplete, and Drones wasn't banged up in that first overtime and they had to go to Schlee off the bench? So to me, this stuff sort of evens out, and perhaps Vanderbilt is where it should be at this moment of time. But I do suspect most Vanderbilt fans would sit here and say, this was not the 3-2 that we expected.
Last thing for you, Andrew, how'd you celebrate on Saturday night? Did you crack open a bourbon? What'd you do? Because we saw the Vandy fans, they were carrying the goalpost down to the river. How did you and the rest of the broadcast crew celebrate?
Well, first off, we soaked it in. I remember sitting on the broadcast going I don't want to go to break. I just want to sit here and watch the storming of the field and the goalposts go down and all of it. But I do have a 4-year-old at home. So if you consider bath time, wrestling on PJs, and a good Dr. Seuss book as celebrating a victory over number 1 Alabama, then I had quite the party.
Well, that's awesome, Andrew. Congrats, man. It was a heck of a call, heck of a moment. And I don't know if you're going to top that one in your broadcast career. Let's hope you have a few more moments like that down the road.
I certainly hope so, right? Because again, Clark is attempting to build something that goes beyond this particular moment. But I am not naive. I recognize that there is a significant chance. Again, I hope I'm wrong, but this will be in the top 1, 2, 3, 4, potentially 5 moments, regardless of how long this career goes. So I enjoyed every second of it.
Yeah, 0-60 now, 1-60 all time against a top-ranked team, Vanderbilt. Andrew, thanks so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
All right, more right here on Locked On SEC. What's up, everybody? Today's episode is presented to you by our friends over at the Game Time app. And Game Time, they got a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. And what they do is they filter out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals you can get on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. The curation process is going to make it super easy for you to save on sporting events, concerts, whatever it is. Look, I'm looking through the Game Time app right now. I can look at sports. You want to get to see the next Texas A&M football game, LSU at A&M. Woo, tickets are getting pricey for that one, but they will show you all the different prices there on the Game Time app. Man, at Texas A&M, they're in high demand right now because they are playing like a great football team. Look at some other events you can get in on. They got NBA games. They've got the NFL games. They got big events like Monster Jam. Looking at all the different things they got going on here, music, concerts, and shows. Go check it out over at the Game Time app. And look, I love the all-in pricing feature. You can toggle that on, and it's going to show your total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Go take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Create an account. Use our code LOCKEDONCollege. Get $20 off your first purchase. I've done that. Took advantage of it. Terms apply. Create an account. Redeem our code LOCKEDONCollege. Get $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It is game time. All right, one more segment here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And did want to mention this before we get out of here. The NCAA Division I committee voted Tuesday to shorten the college football and basketball transfer portal window. The decision will take effect this transfer portal cycle, and it impacts the winter window. Over the last 2 years, the transfer portal went from 60 days to 45 days, and now it goes down to 30 days. In basketball, the portal will open after the second round of the NCAA tournament and will conclude before the end of April. Athletes will still be given a 30-day window to transfer if a coach leaves. Now, in college football, athletes will have a 20-day window in the winter and then 10 days in the spring. So for the current year, mark down these dates. December 9th through December 28th. That is going to be this upcoming transfer portal window. And just keep this in mind. The SEC championship game is on December 7th. So if you're one of those teams that's not going to play for the SEC championship, your last game is what, like November 28th or whatever, that last weekend in November. So you'll have about a week and a half for your coach to sit down with your players and kind of discuss, all right, who's going to be hitting the portal, who's not, are you coming back, all that kind of stuff. If you're playing the SEC championship game, you got 2 days, basically, when you finish playing for the SEC title, whether you win or lose, then you got to go sit down with your players very quickly and decide, hey, who's entering the portal? because December 9th is the first day it opens and they'll be jumping in. And then vice versa. If you got guys you want to bring in from the portal, you got 20 days till December 28th to decide who's in, who's out. And, this comes on the heels of after National Signing Day, the early signing period, which has happened a few days before that as well. And then the spring portal will be 10 days from April 16th through the 25th. Now that was, if you notice this year, the spring portal was way less active than maybe we initially thought. We thought there was going to be a lot of big names, going through spring practice with their teams and their spring game and all that and going, oh, I'm out of here. We didn't see it as much, the big names is who I'm talking about. So, but this portal here on December 9th through December 28th is going to be the big one where a lot of the big names move on. And we just talked about some of the guys who are already opted out. Matthew Sluka at UNLV, he'll be on the move elsewhere. Jaheim Otis from Alabama, Bear Alexander at USC. These are all guys who will be hitting the portal officially on December 9th and starting to decide, where they're going to go. And just again, for clarification, you just have to put your name in the portal in that time. You don't have to right away announce where you're transferring or where you're going. So the NCAA Division I Council, they decided not to eliminate the spring portal as was initially discussed. And they proposed changing the transfer portal windows in football and basketball from 45 to 30 days back in June. The data gathered over the first 2 years of transfer windows found most athletes enter the portal within the first couple weeks. So they're going to limit this thing even more. But the SEC, Big Ten, ACC, Big 12, all of them supported the elimination of the 15-day spring portal. And, look, a lot of coaches were saying this is too much of a headache. And a lot of these moves come as roster limits are set to hit when the impending House versus NCAA settlement is officially certified. College football currently allows 85 scholarship players on a roster, but with walk-ons, rosters will hover around 120. And with these settlement terms, there will be a roster limit of 105 as has been proposed. So for those who care, that's what you need to know, the bare bones of the transfer portal and the ever-changing landscape of the transfer portal in college football. One more tidbit before we get out of here. The latest Heisman odds have been updated out there over at FanDuel. The favorite at FanDuel right now to win the Heisman is Ashton Jeanty, the running back do-it-all player over at Boise State. He has put up some ridiculous numbers so far. Behind him, it's Travis Hunter at Colorado. Goes both ways, plays offense and defense. Cam Ward, the Miami quarterback, he's up there. And fourth on their list is Jalen Milroe from Alabama at plus 900. Now, his odds took a little bit of a hit after losing to Vanderbilt this past weekend. His odds dropped from plus 220 to plus 900. Remember when he beat Georgia? I mean, we were talking about Milroe as one of the favorites to win the Heisman. And so that dropped to plus 900, but that's good value. If you could find that, what's that, 9-1 on Jalen Milroe? Pretty good odds if you can get that. They also have Dylan Gabriel at plus 1,400 at Oregon. And Carson Beck at Georgia, they got him at plus 1,400. Keep in mind, Georgia, if they can beat Texas here in a couple weeks, see what they do the rest of the way. But maybe they could run the table, get to the SEC championship, win it. Maybe a good chance for Carson Beck there to get back into this Heisman race and Heisman conversation. One more here. Jackson Dart, they list as a plus 1,600 over at Ole Miss. And then it's funny, Quinn Ewers was on this list, or rather Arch Manning was on this list when he was getting the start, but Quinn Ewers kind of back up this list at plus 1,800 now that he's coming back this week. And one more on here, Nico Iamaleava at plus 3,000 among SEC quarterbacks. The other names as kind of long shots from the SEC, Garrett Nussmeier plus 5,000 at LSU. I think that's pretty damn good value if you can get if LSU can run the table, if they beat Ole Miss, beat Alabama, beat A&M, Garrett Nussmeier. Look, Jaden Daniels won the Heisman last year with a couple of losses. Wouldn't be crazy to think the numbers that Garrett Nussmeier's putting up if he wins a couple of big games on his resume. What's that? About 50-1. Pretty good numbers there. Brady Cook at Missouri plus 15,000. Diego Pavia plus 15,000 at Vanderbilt. If Diego adds a couple more resume wins to his list, he gets pretty attractive. And then, that's about it for the SEC guys. All right. Thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. Keep coming back and checking us out. And hey, for your second listen, you can check out some of our other great podcasts like Corey Burton. He does Locked on Vanderbilt, does a great job covering them. Go check that out. Make that your second listen. I'm Chris Gordon. This has been Locked on SEC. You guys have a great day. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.